Sometimes the sharpest pain doesn't come from shouting or slammed doors. It comes from silence. The kind of silence that lingers when the person you love looks at you with eyes that no longer see you the same way. This story is about one of those moments when a secret becomes too heavy to hide, and the truth shows itself, not in words but in a single expression. I thought he'd never find out. That was the lie I clung to over and over again. I convinced myself I was careful, that I was smart enough to bury what I'd done. But the second I saw the hurt in his eyes, I knew my world had just shattered. My name is Claire, and I was married to Evan for 6 years. On the surface we were the picture of perfection. He was charming, reliable, the kind of man everyone admired instantly. I was the ambitious one, always reaching for more. Together, we seemed unstoppable. But the truth was, I was the one who broke us. It began so quietly, I barely noticed. There was a coworker, Alex. Nothing remarkable about him, but he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. At work, he listened when I vented. He noticed the little things Evan no longer did. One night, after a late meeting, I laughed too hard at one of his jokes. Suddenly, we were closer than we should have been. That first kiss should have been the end. Instead, it became the beginning. I told myself it wasn't real, that it meant nothing. I loved Evan. I believed I could keep the two worlds separate, that my marriage would remain untouched if I was careful. I thought hiding it was protecting him. But that lie became my shield and my cage. Weeks slipped into months. The guilt buzzed constantly in the back of my mind. Each time Evan looked at me, I smiled too quickly, kissed him too intensely, cooked his favorite meals, desperate to prove I was still a good wife. But guilt always leaks out. One evening, Evan came home early. He was supposed to be at a dinner meeting. I was texting Alex. Nothing explicit, but words I'd never want Evan to see. Panicked, tried to hide my phone, and saw confusion flash in his eyes. He didn't question me, but something in him changed that night. From then on, he watched me quietly. He noticed the way I held my phone tighter, the hesitation in my answers. He didn't accuse me. He just looked, and that was worse than any argument. I'll never forget one night on the couch, watching some forgettable show. I turned to share a laugh with him, and saw his eyes. Not angry, not cold, just wounded. It was as if he was silently asking, "Why? Why would you do this to me?" I wanted to confess, to tear off the bandage, but I froze. I couldn't destroy the version of me that lived in his heart, the wife he believed in. So I smiled, even as guilt burned through me. But silence is its own confession. Eventually, one night he asked me a question so simple it broke me. "Claire, do you still love me?" My throat locked. I wanted to say, "Of course." But in his eyes, I knew he already had his answer. That silence between us screamed louder than words. After that, I tried harder. Tried to make him laugh, to close the cracks. But nothing worked. He wasn't angry, not outwardly, just distant. And that was the cruelest punishment. I told myself if I ended it with Alex, maybe Evan and I could heal. So I cut Alex off coldly, believing it would save my marriage. But the truth was the damage was already carved deep. Evan didn't need my confession. He already knew. Then came the moment I'll never forget. At dinner, just the two of us, I had planned to confess. But before I could speak, he whispered, "I don't think I know who you are anymore." My chest went hollow. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't angry. He just looked tired, broken. In that moment, I saw myself through his eyes. Not as his loyal wife, but as a stranger who betrayed him. I broke down, crying, begging, telling him it was over, that it meant nothing. But the truth was already written in his silence. Evan didn't storm out. He just nodded, as if he had known all along. That calm acceptance cut deeper than rage ever could. We drove home in silence. The space between us in the car felt endless, even though we sat inches apart. Afterward, we lived like ghosts in the same house. He never asked for details. He didn't want to know. And maybe that was the most devastating part. His silence told me nothing I said would change what he felt. At night, I reached for him, only to find cold space. His back turned, his breath heavy with the weight I had placed on him. I wanted to scream, to beg him to look at me like before. But deep down I knew I'd stolen that from us forever. Weeks passed. Finally, one evening I begged him to talk. Sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaking my face, I asked if there was any chance for us. He looked at me with hollow eyes and said quietly, "I don't hate you, Claire. But every time I see you, I see what you did. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to unsee it." That's when I realized the truth. Affair isn't just about lies or stolen moments. It's about rewriting someone else's story without their consent. Rewrote ours. And Evan was left living in a version of our marriage he never chose. We didn't divorce immediately. We lived in limbo, tied by history but broken by betrayal. Sometimes I caught him looking at me, and I hoped love was still there. But his gaze held grief, not love, as if he was mourning someone who had died, even though I was right there. I don't know what our future holds. Maybe time will soften it. Maybe we'll drift apart for good. But one thing is certain: secrets always surface. Not through words, not through evidence, but through the quietest, most devastating truth, the look in the eyes of the person who once trusted you completely. And that look, the pain I see in Evan's eyes, will haunt me for the rest of my life. What strikes me most is how betrayal reveals itself. Not in fights, not in proof, but in silence. In a gaze that says what words cannot. Sometimes the worst part isn't being discovered, it's realizing you've destroyed something in someone that can never be repaired.